How to bulk replace smart objects in Photoshop. If you work with smart objects in Photoshop, whether you're creating mockup images or whatever it happens to be, you've probably noticed what an incredibly boring, repetitive chore it is to do this manually, one at a time. You come here, you find the smart object, you find your image, you replace it, then you go File, Export. Wow, one image exported successfully. Then you come here, you do it again for image number 2. Or maybe if you need to, make sure that the image fits optimally inside of the scene, maybe instead you double click the smart object, step into the scene, then you have to come here, open your next image, come here, drop it like this, paste it. Maybe you need to do some resize operations to make sure it fits correctly. Then maybe you need to flatten the image, save, then you come back over. 2 measly images created from all that work and effort. What you're probably wondering is there a way to automate this process to where instead of doing it manually, wasting hours of time individually doing these robotic, monotonous steps, why can't I just say, here's my entire folder of input images that I want to use? If maybe you have, 75 or 100 or dozens of images, why can't I just specify my entire folder that I want to do this for, and then it can just automatically export the mockup images to a specified output folder so that I can just automate the process of creating my required mockup images? Excellent question, and that's exactly what we're going to focus on here in this video. This is a Photoshop plugin called Batch Replace Smart Objects, which does exactly that. It allows you to perform bulk operations where you can basically just point to your input folder of artwork images, and for each image in the folder, it'll automate the process of rotating in each image into the smart object and exporting the final mockup image to your specified output folder. Instead of wasting hours of time doing the tedious, boring work of individually creating and exporting your mockup images in Photoshop, you can just set up your operations using this plugin, click a few things, and it'll automate the entire process for you. So to add this plugin to Photoshop, you're just going to want to install it from the official Adobe listing page. I'll post a link in the description and comments, but you can also just Google it and you'll find it that way. Once you add the plugin to Photoshop, you can really set it up wherever you want to. You can have it free floating like this. I like to have it off to the side here. And this top section here is basically the main panel where you set up your operations. There's some other features we'll talk about and additional cool functionalities, but we'll start with the basics for now. So the way this plugin works is you can either specify an individual Photoshop document, a PSD file, or you can switch it to this mode and you can actually point to an entire folder of PSD files to use. For this first operation, we're just going to specify one Photoshop document, so we'll just click this. I have my folder of PSD files here, and I'm just going to select this room mockup that we have. In terms of how the plugin knows what to do, really as long as your mockup file just has one single smart object, it'll automatically perform the replacement operation on that particular smart object. If it's a more complex scene, maybe you have a file where there's several smart object layers. A lot of mockup templates that you'll buy online, they're these really sweaty, complicated files where there might be a dozen smart objects inside of there. And really there's only one particular one that actually needs to be used for the operation to create your desired mockup images. If it's a more complex mockup scene like that, all you have to do is make sure that the target smart object layer that you want to perform the bulk replacement operation on is highlighted as the active smart object layer in the document. So we selected our Photoshop document to use. We're going to select our input folder next. This is simply the folder of your artwork images. We're going to run this first operation using this folder here, artwork images number 2. That one has just 15 images. We'll just run it with this one for now. And you can specify if you want to stretch images to fit smart objects. Now that's useful if you know there's going to be some variance in your images. And I'm actually going to drop a couple in there just to show you how that works. So I have this folder here where I have some different aspect ratios. I'm going to drop some of these in there just to show you how it'll automatically resize your images to perfectly fit the mockup scene. So we're going to come back here. We're going to paste these in here. And even though the aspect ratio of this smart object and canvas art piece is 20:30. What I have in here is a couple 4:5s and a couple 3:4s. And what you'll see is even though they aren't the exact needed aspect ratio, the plugin, as long as this checkbox is selected, it'll just automatically resize them so they perfectly fit the mockups. What happens if you try to place images inside of here that don't fit perfectly? It'll end up looking like shit because the images don't fit right and it'll spill over and it's just not sized correctly. So the cool thing about this plugin is it'll just automatically resize all of your artwork images so that it perfectly fits the mockup. Now, if you know for an absolute fact that all of your images are just the perfect aspect ratio, maybe you come here, maybe you go view details, and you can set up dimensions. And if you see, hey, everything is the exact same size and everything's perfect, cool, then In that particular case, maybe you can run it without this checked. It does run a little faster if you don't use this option, but generally it's recommended just to be safe, just to make sure all your mockups look perfect. Just leave this checked and it'll just create perfect looking mockups every time. Final thing to do is specify the output folder. This is simply where you want your final exported mockup images to be saved to. So I just have this folder here, final mockup images, select folder. That's really it. You can specify JPEG or PNG image quality. If there's transparency that you want preserved in your mockup scene, maybe you have something like this where you want the transparency retained, you can use the PNG file type and it'll preserve that alpha channel. Otherwise, if you're just looking for basic images and don't need anything fancy, you can just use the JPEG file type. You can also specify for each of your exported mockup images what you want the save quality set to. This basically controls the amount of compression that gets applied to your images. So if you want the highest possible save quality, then you can set this to the higher end of the spectrum, and the image quality will be great, but the file size will be very large. Conversely, if you're looking for a really low file size and you're comfortable with a lower quality image, you can go towards the lower end of the spectrum, and it'll apply more compression. You can do this for JPEG or PNG, works the same way regardless. The one thing that I would say is just test out a couple different settings just for your particular needs and just find out, what's my target image quality, what's the target file size that I'm going for. If you're posting these online for an e-commerce website, cool. Maybe you're going for a faster load time for, a better customer experience on the website. Maybe you go towards the lower end of the spectrum. If all you care about is just, excellent quality mockups, maybe it's for a graphic design workflow, like you're creating this for clients or something. Just test out a couple settings and just find out what works best for your particular needs and workflow. That's really it. We're just gonna click run this now, and it's just gonna automate this process for us. So as you can see, it's opening the image, and that's so that it can perform the resize operation to make it fit the mockups. And it's just doing this entirely on autopilot. This operation is completely finished. So we're just gonna pop over here, go to our final mockup images folder, and as you can see, it just automatically created the mockups for us. I wanna draw your attention to these in particular, because these were the ones, this was the 3x4 image, 3x4, 3x4, and this was the 4x5 and the 4x5. So as you can see, it resized the images to fit the scene, and what that allows you to do is if there's variance in your images, maybe they're not the exact same size or aspect ratio or resolution or whatever it is, no problem. Just keep this checkbox enabled, and it'll just automatically make great looking mockups. We just used it to create 22 images here, but if you're creating hundreds of mockups, maybe you're doing different rooms, different variants, maybe you're doing different product options on your website where, the black frame, the brown frame, the white frame. Then you want to show some room mockups, like, hey, how does it look mocked up in different environments? Different scenes, different moods, different colors and stuff. If you have hundreds of images, the time savings of being able to automate this can just be truly enormous. So that's the basic setup where you just point to one individual Photoshop document. The cool thing about this plugin is you can actually switch the mode to where it lets you select an entire folder of PSD files to use. So we're going to set up and run a quick operation using this mode just to show you how the time savings of automating this process can be truly gigantic. Folder of PSD files to use. I'm going to come here. I have 9 different mockup templates in this folder. I'm going to pop over. As you can see, we have the canvas product variants, the framed and the plain, and then we have the 5 different room mockups here. So if you're running an e-commerce store or creating mockups for clients, whatever it is, if you have different environments or mockups that you need to use, using this particular setting can be a really big time saver. Everything else is the same input folder to use. We're just going to come here and we'll specify the artwork images. I'm going to select this folder, and then we'll do the output folder to use. Again, all you got to do is just say where you want the mockups exported to. We're going to select the folder, and everything else is good to go. I'm going to leave this unchecked for the operation just because I know all of the images in this folder are the perfect size, and it just runs a little faster that way. So what it's going to do, I'm going to click run this now. It's going to start with the first PSD file in this folder, and it's just going to perform the operation, make the mockups, boom, and then it moves on to the second one. We're on to the third one. It's just flying right now. It's creating the mockups. We'll come over here, final mockup images too. As you can see, it's just absolutely flying through it right now. We're onto the room mockups already. We're onto room number 2, which is creating the mockups in the background. It doesn't always update automatically. I don't know if that's just a Photoshop thing where it's like preserving resources or whatever. And that's it. Operation finished just like that. We just cranked them out real fast here. So here we are. We have 135 images created. We used 9 different mockup templates, and it just cranked it out entirely on autopilot. Quite literally just a few button clicks. Here's my folder, here's the other folder, here's the other folder. Click a button and save hours worth of boring repetitive work. Something else you'll notice is that it groups the images that it creates by file name. So sort of the naming convention is it goes artwork name followed by the mockup name. So this is good for SEO if you have, you know, framed canvas brown, the artwork description or whatever it is. It also makes it easy to just come into this folder, and if you need to just drag and drop this onto your e-commerce website, you know, drop it into an email to a client, whatever it is, the way that it groups it, it just sort of does it automatically for you. Something else you can do is save operations to run later, so you don't necessarily always have to run them in real time. If you have a standardized workflow where, you know, I always use, this is my input folder where my artwork images are always at, I always want them exported here, you can just save the operations to run later. You can just come down here and say creates my canvas art mockups, and then you can save the operation, and instead of setting this up each time, you can just come here, create my canvas art mockups. Here's the saved operation. It basically saves whatever parameters are set up in this top section when you click the save button. So you can just come here, click run, and it'll quite literally automate this with one single button click. You can even save multiple step workflows. So instead of just saving one individual operation, a workflow basically allows you to chain together different operations and just run them one after the other. You know, step one is one saved operation. Step two is another saved operation, and so forth. So maybe you want to specify, you know, particular Photoshop documents and you want to set it up that way. Or, you know, you just have a workflow where maybe you use one folder for client number one, another folder for client number two, whatever it is. You can just chain it together. So your entire workflow, you could just come here, click a button, and automate the entire process. I'll show you how to set that up real quick. You just come here, create new workflow. Let's just say creates all client mockups. You could do something like that. So maybe you have an entire folder of PSD files that you use for client number 3 or whatever. We'll just say that's the folder, input folder. You know, hey, I use different artwork images for this guy, and I want to make sure that his get exported to his specific folder. You could set it up like this. Maybe he likes PNGs. Cool. You could just come down here. Step 1, we're going to say clients number 3 mockups. Then rinse and repeat. Maybe you have a different folder for client number 4. You could come here, set it up like this, point to different folders, different inputs, different settings, whatever it is, final mockup images 4, and then you could just come here and you could say clients number 4 mockups. Add and save it like that. You can save operations in either mode. So you can see that the plugin basically detects what's the operation mode. Is it set to use a folder of PSD files, or is it set to use an individual Photoshop documents? Doesn't matter either way. Basically whatever is set up in this top section, when you save or add the steps, it'll just save whatever's up here. So really by chaining together entire operations like this, you come to this workflow section, create all client mockups. Client number 3, it's going to use these settings. Client number 4, it's going to use these settings. And the way it works is it'll just do step number 1, complete the operation, automatically move on to step number 2, complete the operation, and so forth for however many steps you have set up. So again, the usefulness of this is instead of setting it up each time for all of your operations, let alone doing it manually by individually replacing the contents and exporting the images, if you have a standardized workflow and it's always the same mockup files and folders that you use, you can just set this up, save your operation, come here, click one single button, and automate the entire process. Anyway, check it out. If you're tired of the boring, repetitive work of individually creating your mockups and exporting them, this plugin is a fantastic way to save hours of time on this process. Check the link in the description or comments if you happen to be interested in automating this boring, repetitive work task. Hope you found this helpful. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to drop a like and comment for some of that YouTube algorithm engagement action. That's all I got for now, and see you later.